again. So I came out and didn't work at 2007, but I moved jobs in 2010, and with a boss who knew my story, my whole story, very supportive, all that kind of stuff. But what I found, and some of you who have ever experienced this, you may know exactly what I'm going to describe. So I'm out, but then I have a new group.
Right.
And I'd never done this before, right? And of course I didn't, this is all in hindsight, right? I was like, oh yeah, did you? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So I drive on. But what I quickly realized is after a couple months, I was getting this feeling down in my stomach. And what had happened is I'd entered this group, and I started going back to the throwing up the old walls. Hey, what'd you do in the weekend? And you kick into these behavioral things that you haven't been ingrained with for decades. And I was doing that again. And finally one night I'm like, I figured out what had happened, because I'm a bit slow. It took a couple months. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I am never, ever going to feel like that ever again.
Right.
So I actually started the process of coming out again, because this is a new group. These people didn't. And that is something that we talked about earlier, but it is a recurring theme in talking to others from the community. Something that allies may not totally appreciate, but every time you're in a new situation with new people, you might have to have split-second decisions about whether you reveal or don't. Mm-hmm. Is it a safe environment or not? And that's where you get into reading the room. And I call them yellow flags. If I see a lot of yellow flags going off in a room, we don't go there. Yeah. But if you feel like you're in a safe environment, then you do. But that is an interesting dynamic. And so since then, and I've sort of had the big aha moment, that keeps happening all the time.
Right. There's this constant sort of, it's like every minute you're still deciding whether this is the time when you're going to say something or not. And every time I teach a new class, it's sort of the same thing. Like, do I say something about my partner?
And even, my partner and I, we have kids, and so there's a lot of assumptions. And even to get into that, it's like, and then I'm too tired, I can't do it right now.
Yeah, right. So some of it isn't even that you're afraid, you're just exhausted.
Too tired.
It's exhausting.
It's too much, yeah.
It's exhausting. I don't know, Pia, did you?
Well, yeah, so it's been, my experience is somewhat similar, but a little bit different. So I started my professional career after gay marriage was legal in Canada. And I think, like, every time I'm in a new situation, you want to feel it out a little bit. So I would typically start, like when I'm starting in a new team or a new company, I would start with talking about my partner. It's a nice soft intro, and I know a lot of people are using that term for all kinds of relationships now. But I would usually start with, my partner, then slip in a few pronouns here and there, selective pronouns, and see how that goes. But at the same time, I've also found that, despite my best efforts, people don't always pick up that I'm using she's, and or maybe think they've misheard. And I remember a really funny story, actually. I remember one time after working, several late days in the office, I had finally, and I dropped all these cues for a couple of months about the she's and my partner, and so finally I just said, I don't think my wife's going to like it if I work a late night again. And then so one of my colleagues had said, your wife. And I said, yes. And then it's, now it's like the confrontation, right? So I'm like, yes, my wife. Your wife. Yes, my wife. Your wife. Didn't you know I was married? So I started with that, so that was fine. And then it kind of continued on. He thought there for a moment. And he wasn't, he was new to Canada, so had a different cultural experience. And then he thought for a moment, and then he said, does she call you her husband? So, anyways, yeah, so that, yeah.
Right. So, and I think that is something very interesting about the Canadian experience, is the fact that we do have this, so many different cultures in Canada. I've also noticed, as an American coming to Canada, that it is nice that a lot of hetero couples also say my partner. It is a different kind of thing in Canada that made me feel like, this might be easier here than it is in the States. But